We have a full complement and 1 minute to go, and then we'll start. So. All right, we're at 7 o'clock, so you ready? Good evening. I am going to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Elmhurst Zoning and Planning Commission. I will first ask Eileen Franz before we start that, I'm going to make sure if everyone can hear me. Emily, can you hear me in the applicant room?
Yes, I can, Chair Rose.
Mike, can you hear me in the public comment room?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Susan McCoy, Commissioner McCoy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Chair Rose.
Thank you. Mark Hoffman, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you, Chair Rose.
Commissioner Garland, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Commissioner Pittman, can you hear me? You are muted. Thank you. I know the court reporter can hear me. Commissioner Callaway, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Commissioner Snyder, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Uditsky, can you hear me?
All good.
Commissioner Burns, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Great. So I'll now ask Eileen Franz to please call the roll to establish a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Callaway.
Here.
Commissioner Garland.
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Here.
Commissioner McCoy. Commissioner McCoy. Oh, I think you're muted. I think Commissioner McCoy is muted.
I'm going to unmute her right
Okay.
now. Ask her again.
Commissioner McCoy?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Commissioner Pittman?
Here.
Commissioner Snyder?
Here.
Commissioner Uditsky?
Here.
Chair Rose?
Here. We have a quorum. Excellent. I'm going to open up first for any public comment. This is a part in our agenda when anyone public has the opportunity to make any public comment they wish to make. I want to advise anyone in the public comment room, however, that the public record for both of these cases is closed. And if you wish to make comment on these cases, that we are by law obligated not to include that in the record. But if there's anything else you want to make, or if you're just here to listen, that's fine too. So I'm going to ask if anyone has any public comment they wish to make.
Yes, we have one person in the public comment room like to make public comment.
Okay. I see you.
Okay.
That's good.
My name is Mary Ayler, and I live at 352 Shady Lane. I'm representing myself, but I'm also on the Glowy Woods Flooding Task Force. I would just like to say that we've had several brand new, beautiful houses on all 3 streets with a total of 11, I believe, approximately. And for the lot in question on Shady Lane, I think we would all be happy with a new one house on that to help keep the flooding okay. So I wanted to just state positively that we are not adverse to a new house on the lot, and we'd be very happy to see one. And that's all I have for now. Okay,
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you to the committee for considering all our comments last week. So thank you.
And thank you for coming out on a cold night to talk to us. We appreciate that. So,
Thanks.
Is-
Good job.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? Do we
That's
need
all
to-
we have. I don't know if there's anybody on the email, but no one in the public comment room.
I will ask Eileen to please check her email.
I don't have any emails. I think Emily went to run and take a look at my voicemail and make sure that there's nobody on the phone.
Okay.
No voicemails for public comment.
Great. Thank you very much. The next item of business is receipt of written communications. Do we have any written communications, Eileen, to consider?
No, nothing other than the information that was already submitted for the cases.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next item of business is the approval of minutes of our November 10th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve and a second to approve those minutes?
So moved.
So move Commissioner Burns and a second.
Second.
Commissioner Snyder, thank you. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions that anyone would like to make to those minutes? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Eileen Franz to call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway,
Yes.
Commissioner Garland,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman,
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky,
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. Thank you. The minutes are approved. We have two cases tonight for deliberation. The first case is case 20P07, the Delta Sonic map amendment, conditional use permits, variations, and plat of subdivision, which is a consolidation. So we're going to start this off. We've had some discussion with the city attorney because, Eileen, do you need to make any comments first on this? Okay. Because there are 7 different motions that will need to be made in order to discuss this, we're going to ask first for a motion to approve the petitioner's request as presented. That will then allow us to discuss all of these, each of these 7 particular motions, 7 particular requests, and then we will vote on each of them separately. So it just allows us to discuss this as a whole, as opposed to, in the past, sometimes folks have thought that, gee, if I approve this or if I approve that, but I don't want to approve something down the line, what does that mean? So we'll start off first with the general one so we can all discuss it. To approve the petitioner's request as presented and a second, and then we will move on to discuss the specifics of that. Commissioner Garland, so moves. Or do you have a question?
Just a question. A question is
Sure.
a matter of process. Does it make sense to go in a particular order with these? By way of example, to discuss the map amendment as a starting point, if for some reason the map amendment is something that the group, we can't reach consensus on, does it make sense to talk about the other issues or the other requests for conditional use and variation if there's not some consensus on a map amendment?
That's a great point, and it does make some sense to do that. I've kind of put them in what I think is a logical order, that we would first look at the map amendment and then look at the plat of subdivision, which consolidates the 4 lots. Then we would look at a request for a conditional use for a car wash, the request for a conditional use for an automobile detail shop, that would be 4th. And then we would look at the variation from the reservoir required for a car wash, and the variation for parking, and then the variation for the sign height. So if that makes some sense, I've tried to group them in some way that made logical sense to me. I don't know if it makes it to everybody else, but that was my thought, that we would do it in that order.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So can I have a motion to approve as presented and then a second?
So moved.
Commissioner Burns, and a second to that? Commissioner McCoy, thank you. So this now allows us to talk about it in general. So I'm going to ask us to first consider the map amendment, which is to rezone from R1 single family residence to C2 community shopping and service district for 3 parcels. And that would be, actually, we probably should have taken first the plat of subdivision, which is consolidating the 4 lots into 1 lot. So if you remember, there are 3 residential lots. 1 the petitioner owns, 2 the petitioner has under contract. It's my understanding. And he's asking for all of those 3 lots to be consolidated with, consolidated into C2 community shopping and service district for the parcels. So let me just open this up for discussion. We'll do this a little differently. We will just do it as discussion, and then I'll ask for specific, someone to make a motion to approve each one of those individually. So, thoughts on this?
Well, I'll jump in here.
Commissioner Burns.
It seems to me that the request for the map amendment in the subdivision sort of go hand in hand in a way, because you're discussing what's going to happen to this total land holding. They already own the 1 we'll call residential lot, even though it's not really used residentially, that's on Bonnie Bray. And then I believe they're under contract for the 2 lots on Glade. So this will be a complete holding under 1 ownership.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of sense to consolidate it. It makes it easier for planning purposes. It's going to be 1 owner. From their point of view, it makes sense. They'll get 1 tax bill, and everything else that relates to the property, it'll be 1 property index number, 1 lot of record, and so forth. In terms of the zoning, it makes sense to consolidate it. The depth of commercial zoning on this side of North Avenue already extends to the depth that would be created with this map amendment. So I think it's completely in line. So those 2 things I think are easily acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that, or thoughts, differences of opinion on that one? Commissioner Uditsky.
So just the comment in general, this is one that I think from a safety standpoint, we should be looking at as well. If anybody has driven by that Delta Sonic on a busy summer day, winter day, you name it. The line is ridiculous. I frankly don't know how it got approved in the first place. Whoever the traffic consultant was on that should be questioned if possible. But I've seen it on numerous occasions actually back up into the street, and I believe that the gentleman from Delta Sonic had indicated, sometimes whether it be the police or somebody's out there waving people, to go on because they are backed up, into the street. It's a really, dangerous condition there. So, we're always looking at the standards and everything like that, and very rarely do we have something that is a true safety issue. But given that, the use is already there, the car wash is already there, I do feel it needs to be remedied somehow. So I was very happy to see that, as part of, ultimately as part of this plan.
Yeah, I was actually surprised to hear him say that they thought that only happened 10 days a year. It seems to me that it's more frequent than that, but, and I think to your point, this has been a car wash since the 1970s. Is that correct, Eileen? I think
I believe so.
So my guess is that it was not nearly as popular as it grew to be. So when it was initially approved, perhaps they thought it wasn't going to grow like it did, but it surely has. So it's an issue. So other thoughts about the map amendment and the consolidation of these lots? Commissioner Garland.
Yeah, and this may be a bit of a theme as we kind of talk about all the other requests here, but I think that from a commercial perspective, as you're looking at it from North Avenue, this, for all the reasons that Commissioner Burns pointed out, this seems to make a lot of sense from a mapping and a consolidation perspective, given the depths of the properties on either side and just how it operates. But when you flip it and you look at the suitability from a residential perspective, that's kind of where it gets to be a little bit fuzzy for me. And so I throw that out because I think that it's something that is a theme that kind of carries through all of these the requests that are being made this evening, and we only have to point to the vocal residents as well
Right.
that participated in the public hearing.
Right. Points well taken. Anyone else have comments on this? Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I would just echo what Commissioner Garland said. I struggle a little bit with, I do believe that it makes a lot of sense to consolidate what is kind of a hodgepodge of uses right now. You've got what used to be residential that's now being used as a parking lot for a commercial property. You've got another property that's under contract that's residential, but obviously apartments. So it's not houses, it's kind of a buffer between. It makes sense. I think you can support doing it in a lot of ways, but I also I hear what the residents are saying, and the people that are immediately adjacent in those residential homes bought those homes without having an adjacent commercial property, and now that's about to change. So I struggle a little bit with that concern, even though I can make an argument on the other end that it could be supported as well.
Great, I appreciate that. Anyone else have any comments on this part? Commissioner Snyder.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rose. I would just like to say I did take time to really read through and listen to all the residents' concerns. And just from a mapping perspective, I definitely agree with everything that Commissioner Burns has said, that it just makes a lot of sense to look at this property as a consolidated piece. And that's in accordance with the comprehensive plan and what the comprehensive plan calls for. However, I do struggle with these the meeting point and the transition between residential and commercial. And, you know, we've talked before about watching or looking at appropriate transitions. And it's nice to have these areas where you go from single family to maybe to apartment to maybe to commercial, and you've got these sort of stepped graduated approaches. Whereas here we're looking at, it's literally going to be just, you know, a 5-foot line between the two properties. So that it's a kind of a fine line. And I have a lot of compassion for the plight of some of those nearby residents in terms of looking at what they're going to be dealing with. So I'm struggling a little bit with that, but balancing that with what's called for in the comprehensive plan, you know, we have to look at a bigger strategy in terms of how we're going to make the best use of all this land we have. So at any rate, that's just my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And the comprehensive plan does support this step-down approach. To me, it seems also, however, that if it's consolidated into one piece, we have some better and different tools to deal with that, as opposed to relying on an apartment or something to buffer that. We actually have some ability to regulate that, whereas we don't really have that at this point. So, okay. If there's no more comment on this part, I will take us to the crux of the matter, which is the first is a request for a conditional use permit for a car wash and the conditional use permit for an automatic detail shop. So this currently has a car wash on it, but in this area, much like in other parts of town, there are certain uses that no matter what, they require a conditional use. Drive-in banks require them, drive-up restaurants, I believe, is that correct? Also require conditional users. So if they were to tear down what they currently have and build exactly what they have in the same footprint, they would still require a conditional use. So that's for the car wash. But then there is this conditional use permit for an automobile detail shop. So thoughts about this, especially as it relates to the standards for a conditional use permit. What your thoughts are about these requests for these two conditional use permits. You can separate them, you could talk about them together, but might be helpful to think about them in relation to these standards that have to be met.
You know, one way I thought about the standards is that you know, we have 7 conditional use standards, and they seem to fall into a grouping of standards that relate the property in question to the outside world, its surroundings, and then standards that relate to its own internal operation. And then, of course, standard as to whether it's in line with the objectives of the city. It's kind of a generic standard.
Yep. Yep.
And I think the key here is the operational standards, how it relates to the outside world, so to speak, how they operate in context with the other commercial property and the residences on the 2 streets.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to some of the concerns that the other commissioners properly noted that many homeowners raised. It does seem that one mitigation in terms of the impact on the surrounding area is that the employee parking on the one residentially zoned parcel on Bonnie Bray will be eliminated. So the concerns about employees driving up and down the street to get to the parking or to leave should no longer be a concern. So that's mitigated. Also, there'll be no access from Glade. So the access is from North Avenue or the little stub of Bonnie Bray that comes off North Avenue. So that seems to mitigate a lot of the impact on the surrounding areas. The commercial development, it'll be a much bigger building, more square footage, but the lot is big enough to accommodate it. And if you go up and down North Avenue, both east and west of Route 83, you can find properties that are this commensurate magnitude of construction size. So I think it would be in harmony with the area. It's not going to impede orderly development and that sort of thing. And then as far as the operations, of course, this is always the case when an applicant says, we're going to operate this properly and in line with all the standards. But they have been operating this car wash for a long time. This is their business. Delta Sonic has a number of locations around the Chicago area. So I think we can feel reasonably assured that they will operate it in an appropriate manner. So it's sort of a 10,000 foot view of the conditional use standards, but I feel pretty confident that they meet them.
Okay. Commissioner Hoffman, did you have your hand raised earlier? No,
No, but I do have a couple of comments to make.
Sure.
In addition to what Commissioner Burns was stating, I do think that some of the improvements that they had mentioned to include essentially enclosing all of the additional services that they're looking to perform at this site shouldn't go unnoted. I think it's important because it also addresses a number of the neighbors' concerns regarding noise, potentially regarding smell, and that type of thing. Additionally, the improvements that are made to the buffer to include the fence and the landscaping are improvements that would be made because of this development and may not occur unless this happens. So it just speaks to a few of the additional concerns that were brought forward by the neighbors.
thank you. That's very helpful. Commissioner McCoy, you had a comment you wanted to make earlier. You're muted.
No, my question was answered by another one of the commissioners.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have any thoughts on this particular part? Whether it's going to be detrimental to public health, safety, and morals, not injurious to the use. I mean, I think the crux of this issue is, and this is what residents have said, they're saying it's going to be injurious to the use and enjoyment of their property. Any thoughts about that? Folks have. Commissioner Garland?
Yeah, maybe more of a general, but I think that while the applicant stated that they have access to a piece of property for parking for their employees, it is across the street, it is down North Avenue. I think anytime that you have something that's, even a couple of blocks away and in really challenging weather, it's going to be difficult to schlep themselves down there. And I know that they also stated, if I heard correctly, I was having some connection issues, but it sounded like that they were going to provide some transportation.
They did say that, yes.
Yeah, okay. And while they're removing the parking lot that is currently being used on Bonnie Bray, time will tell on this, okay? Just as it relates to it potentially being injurious or having a potential health hazard with respect to having cars parked on either Bonnie Bray or the street to the east, Glade Avenue, and just having the employees walk. I know the general counsel was very vociferous when he said that he's going to hand out his cell phone number, but time will tell on that. But that's just a general concern. I think the idea of it being down the street is probably better as an idea than perhaps a practical application of having employees park on the street and having the potential for additional traffic from that perspective. So
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I thought about that, and I think it was during some of the hospital construction on Berteau when they were doing some significant work there, that they actually, for a period of 2 or 3 years, they ferried people back and forth from a parking lot in North Lake and did that to try to avoid employees parking along the streets of Berteau, 3rd, kind of in that whole area. Seemed to be seamless. They did it. But I don't disagree with you that, the question is how long do you do that? Is that a real solution for it? Or is there some other way to do that? So
I do applaud their efforts and their creativity with the double lanes, and they're thinking fairly innovatively about how to expedite those cars through a pass and that sort of thing. So I think that will help tremendously as it relates to this stack and some potential backup out onto North Avenue.
yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated plan. So their plan to have somebody there, you know, doing traffic, that seems to me absolutely critical to what's going on too. So Commissioner McCoy, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yes, you know, in terms of them parking across the street, they said that they were going to have one of their own cars there to bring the employees back and forth. And since they go in shifts, it's not like somebody comes 1 hour and somebody comes another hour. I believe they come in groups, like
Yes.
first shift, second shift. So that would sort of alleviate the idea that they might park on the street. So
Sure, right. Other comment, Commissioner Pittman.
Just since we're on the topic of parking, my biggest issue with the parking is that they're leasing it from a commercial property, which has parking needs that are changing dependent on their tenants. I think that it's a short-term solution for a long-term problem. We have no idea what sort of lease they're signing. It could be year by year. What happens if the commercial tenant says, sorry, you can't have those spaces anymore? Does then, as Commissioner Garland said, does that create a situation in which it does become impactful to those residential neighborhoods again, which seems to be their biggest complaint? When you look at this, all the things that they are doing seem to be rectifying all the complaints. They're bringing all the things inside. They're hopefully, with their new mechanism for queuing, bringing the traffic off of North Avenue, making vast improvements to the current site. But I do have concerns about this parking because I think that they could run into some issues, and then I'm not sure what they'll do. If they had control over the parking site and it was off-site, I would feel more confident, which is likely what Elmhurst Hospital had. They either had a long-term lease for that 3 years or owned the property or whatever their arrangement was. And since we don't know what that arrangement is, and knowing that parking arrangements can change at any point, that's my biggest concern in this whole thing.
I can answer some of that. I was on the council at the time that they did not own the property, but that large shopping center on North Avenue, on the south side of North Avenue, that's what they leased. They leased slots there. Was it long-term? I don't know. I mean, they certainly knew it was going to take them at least 3 years to do what they had to do. So my guess it was that long. So there's a point. So Commissioner Uditsky.
So I share Commissioner Pittman's concern about the parking. And I think that anytime we factor in things like, sort of unknown, leases or arrangements, for parking and using somebody else's property, that it's always dangerous when, 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, down the road, now we have some sort of problem, and, we granted, some sort of approval, based on this agreement that I'm sure they have, but as Commissioner Pittman indicated, we don't know what the terms are. It could be month to month, it could be, year to year. But it leads me to another concern just generally that I have about the project. As much as I like the one side of it where they've kind of creatively addressed the issue of the backup onto the street, I do have a bit of an issue with the other side, which I think seems to me fairly congested. And ultimately, I see the solution, if you will, to their parking problem being inside, where they have all of those, vacuums that I could see eventually them using several of those spots for employee parking. And if, in fact, they don't have those spots open, it would actually concern me more about the congestion. I mean, just coming in and out, if you've ever been to, any car wash that has those vacuums and people are coming in and out and in and out and in and out, and you have sort of a small area, what is that, on the west side of the building, where cars are coming out of the tunnel, right? And they're also coming in and out of this interior, detail, vacuum, enclosed area, basically the two of them colliding right at the corner there. And then the amount of traffic, that's going to be from people pulling in to a vacuum spot, and they have to pull back out, right, with a very limited area there. I do have some concern about the overall safety of that, and then how that's going to work. But ultimately, to me, when I saw the interior of that enclosed building, I mean, I really felt like that's where they would have their parking.
Are you saying that that's where they might also have room to expand their parking, is in that interior building? Okay.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes, thank you, Rose. So I share Commissioner Garland, Pittman, and Uditsky's concerns over the parking as well. Typically, when looking at an employee's perspective, people take the path of least resistance. And the remote parking solution in theory sounds great. The shuttle sounds great, but in practice, employees running late, everyone's got to coordinate their arrival times. And as we all know, people get there early, get there late, or whatever. And I think Commissioner Uditsky hit the nail on the head when he said, ultimately, the solution will most likely and practically lie within the interior of the detail center itself. I agree with that when I look at it. It just from a customer perspective, looking at is are customers realistically just going to go into the detail center and make all those tight maneuvers just to vacuum out their car? Maybe yes, but practically speaking, that seems to be a lot of effort for, I'm not sure how great of a return, depending on the customer. But the other concern I had was during our testimony when they said that only the first shift employees would be using those parking spaces. It really didn't make sense to me to leave those parking spaces unused throughout the duration of all of the shifts. So I can see where eventually, after the kinks get worked out, they'll figure out some sort of solution for making the best use of that interior space. So, it's a question right now. I think there's going to be some growing pains throughout this process as they figure out the best way to make the best use of their space. I did have concerns, and I had been looking, at the comprehensive plan. I had submitted those questions in advance about moving those traffic bulbs south, which is called out in those sub-area plans. And, maybe in the long run, that's a big project, obviously, to move those bulbs, but perhaps in the long run, the solution can be found there to make better use of that space. So I think it's not that we're necessarily locked into this situation. If we do have potential, if we look at those bulbs to maybe alleviate some of that condition. So that's my thought there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Other comments? Anyone else want to make a comment on this? Yeah, I mean, I think it is of concern, this parking, and the question, to me, it seems that the off-site parking is that, I agree, that's a short-term solution. I'd love to hear what their longer-term solution is. I think I would agree it's in that building, but I would like to have heard them say a little bit more about how that might happen. I also think there's probably some other alternatives that they haven't really explored that are close to their site for either purchasing or much longer term parking. And that would be, that's on the south side of North Avenue where Guac and Tac is, that area. Never is full in terms of parking, but they might, I would be interesting to hear if they have really thought about some other solutions. So anyone else? Commissioner Snyder?
Yeah, I just want to point out that just as a matter of observation, having lived in the area for 18, 19 years, that the Burger King lot is typically pretty empty, and there's a lot of parking over there. So, not that they could necessarily strike up any formal agreement, but it might be a potential solution since it's an immediate neighbor next door for some of the employees to use some of that parking space.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's much more excess parking. I'm going to call it excess. That may be too extreme, but there in several places there that could be utilized. So other thoughts? So do you want to make some comment about this the auto detail shop, which is also a conditional use? Any thoughts about that? I mean, we've talked a little bit about it. That would be any different. The difference obviously in that is when we talk about not injurious to use and enjoyment of other properties, has to do with the scale of that building. Anyone have any thoughts about that? I will say I myself was, I was impressed with the design of it. Windows that aren't windows. At first I thought that's a little odd. Why would you do that? But I think what that does is give, when I looked at the renderings again, and like, you know, I went through all this material again, more in detail today and looked at it, and I thought, you know, this looks like a school. It looks like somebody kind of plunked a school right in a neighborhood. So I think the addition of that, I mean, I think the scale of it, it is big. But I think they've gone to great lengths to really try to somehow make this fit into, as it abuts a residential area to fit into that. So anyone else have any thoughts about any of that? Commissioner McCoy.
Well, they also like leveled down part of that building from third, you know, they made it go down like almost a whole level so that it won't impact the residential neighborhood as much as it would have if they had kept the original height all the way across. So they made some concessions to make the neighbors have a much nicer something to look at. So.
Other thoughts or comments on that? Okay, seeing none. If you're ready to.
Chair Rose?
Commissioner Hoffman, yes.
Hi, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Well, it's obviously a complementary use, and I think it does differentiate them a bit. You know, with the use of the detail center. And again, I just think it's worth noting the considerable investment that they're willing to make by building a structure that's large enough to house all of these additional functions under roof. I agree with the other commissioners who mentioned that, you know, long-term that may solve their parking problem. Wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Snyder. I don't necessarily think there's a lot of people who would be navigating that detail center who aren't going to essentially make use of the detail center, who are just going in there for the vacuum use. So I do think that there's an opportunity there, and agree that you know, the off-site parking is only as good as the length of time on the lease, and working for an employer that uses a significant amount of off-site parking, as well as shuttling to and from, only as good as the mechanisms that are put in place to ensure that the employees adhere by those rules. So definitely not a long-term solution.
Right. Yeah, I think you raise a good point. I was also struck with some of the comments from residents about what we might call boorish behavior by employees, you know, loud music, and, you know, that is an employer's responsibility to monitor that and to do that. They are responsible for that. And I think they heard loud and clear some of those complaints, and I'm going to assume that they will, you know, continue to take action on that. You can't change all of that. So, Commissioner Garland.
And this is a quick question. Forgive me if it was discussed last week and I wasn't able to pick it up, but the egress and that joint egress out of Burger King and the car wash out on the North Avenue, is that a right turn only?
Eileen, can you, I don't think so. I think there is a left, it's left turn now. You can turn left, correct?
Yes, you're asking about from Bonnie Bray onto North Avenue, correct?
Correct. And their egress, their joint egress.
Yes. Yes, you can turn left.
You can turn left. Okay.
I
It
think
could
a
create.
lot of, oops, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Callaway, go. Commissioner Callaway, sure.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Garland, and depending upon the time of day, I think a left turn there is really difficult because you've got the beginning of those two left turn lanes going south on 83. So, I mean, it's a good question because if someone's waiting to turn left there, it could really back up traffic. I guess the question is whether having this egress now onto Bonnie Bray out of the Delta Sonic is going to cause more traffic, than previously existed or currently exists when it's just coming from Burger King alone. I mean,
Is there egress onto Bonnie Bray?
Yes, you have to go kind of onto that bubble onto Bonnie Bray, and then you can't go south, but you can.
Right. So you can't make a left onto Bonnie Bray. So you have to go out onto North Avenue.
You still have to.
Yeah. I just, on some busy days when it does get, when there are challenges on the operational side to take in the cars, the exit here could potentially be challenging given that there is a left turn. The busy days will make it really challenging.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's not that you can currently do it right now. So, my question to them was what kind of increase in business do they think they're going to have? They don't think any more than 5 to 10%, but they expect an increase in the type of business, this detailing thing, which is not car wash, but that's where they're going to recoup some of their money that they're putting into this is that. So they don't expect, they're going to expand the number of cars who want a car wash. So right now that's still, that is still a way that someone could do is turn left onto that. I suspect customers think about that and find other routes. What we don't want to do is direct them down towards Glade or cut in traffic, but there are some other routes that they can do by turning right and finding another way to go. Commissioner Hoffman, you are muted.
I'm fine, just had my hand up not to talk. My apologies.
That's okay. Anyone else have any comments on this? Commissioner Burns.
Just one other comment. In terms of the relationship of the south elevation of this auto detail building towards the residential area behind it. If you go over about a block to the east, there's a Kinder Castle, I think, or is it Kinder
Care, maybe, yeah.
And the street just to the east of that building is Glenview. And the lot immediately south of the Kinder Care, he has one of the newest construction houses on Glenview. It's a new construction house. There is some landscape screening. There's 3 pine trees. There's an open iron fence, so it's really not a privacy fence. Now, whether the Kinder Care operations are comparable to a Delta Sonic, obviously they're different operating models, but it's the mass of the building is sort of similar, and it's actually the Kinder Care goes right up to their south lot line practically, and it seems to have less screening than is proposed for the subject property, and yet somebody decided to build a new house there. So that's sort of anecdotal, but I think it's an indication that it doesn't foreclose the orderly development in the area.
Okay, great. Other thoughts on this? Okay, I'm going to ask if you're ready to move on to some discussion on the variation from the reservoir spaces required for a car wash. And then keep in mind, they need to meet the 3 criteria for a variation. So anyone have any thoughts on this? Reducing the reservoir spaces, variation from that?
All right, I'll jump in.
Okay.
So the required reservoir count would be 42 under the ordinance. What they have is 6. What they're going to provide is 26. So they're sort of splitting the difference. It'll be the proposed operation will be an improvement over the existing operation. Another factor that they brought forward in their submission was that because of some other improvements to the operation on the site, they expect for the waiting cars to move through more quickly. So if they have less standing time, that would reduce the overhang onto North Avenue. So that's the question, whether if we require 42, because it's 7 times whatever.
Right.
So you have 6 spots times 7 is 42. They're proposing 26. I think it's a reasonable compromise, and the unique circumstance, I guess, is it's the configuration of the lot and what they're trying to do there.
Yeah, and you know, even on the busiest days, the number of people waiting on the street, I don't know how many days it would approach 26. So these 20 additional cars that now will be able to line up on the site itself, it's an interesting point, are certainly better than what they currently have. So anyone else have any thoughts on that? Commissioner Snyder?
Thank you. Yes, I just want to say that I think the design or the redesign of the queuing area is really going to improve operational efficiencies. It's going to definitely improve the condition, the existing condition, as Commissioner Burns said, by splitting the difference with the required spaces versus the what's offered. So, you know, I think this is it's very reasonable to this is a reasonable solution. That's all.
Yeah. Anyone else on that? Okay, we come last to, not last, I'm sorry, variation from the parking requirement for a detail shop. Okay, and this is not for the general overall parking, but the parking requirements for the detail shop. Is that correct, Eileen? I believe I'm correct on that. That's what they are requesting the variation from. So it's not with some of the stuff we talked about, it's really what those requirements are for a detail shop.
Yes, the detail shop is based on the square footage of, I believe it's 4 per 1,000. And due to the size of the detail shop, that would require a significant amount of parking. And that's what they're asking for the variation for.
Okay. So I know we've done a lot of discussion about parking in the site in general. This is really the variation for the detail shop. Anyone have any thoughts on this? It's a related issue, and yet it's a little bit different. Commissioner Snyder?
Yes, thank you. So the applicant had pointed out that the use of the detail shop is such that it doesn't really require provided parking for customers. So it's an instance where a customer will come, the car will be retrieved and taken through. The car is what is being serviced. So it's not in need. It just doesn't. They just don't need that due to the operation within the building. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to look at this request and see it as acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Garland? You were muted.
Yes, the requirements here seem awfully onerous. And so particularly when we're looking at the use here, and as I recall, and not unlike what Commissioner Snyder just shared, but how they were going to use the facility and the number of cars that would be there, and the turnaround, it seemed to be reasonable. And so, notwithstanding the 115 that are required, I believe that the applicant put forward a very reasonable response to this request as it relates to the number of spaces required.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Hoffman.
I do recall that during the explanation they gave that the vast majority of people who are going to be using the detail shop essentially were going to be waiting. So they get out of their car, they wait in a sub-waiting area as the detail line was completed, be brought back, approve the detailing work, and be on their way. And felt, and I have some notes here, that only 2 to 5 per day would typically get the full detail or the professional showroom detail, which would be more along the lines of they have to present to the property with someone else, park the car, go in, talk to them, drop it off, that type of thing. So I'm in agreement with the other commissioners that I think what they're requesting seems to be reasonable based on the use.
I think they suggested, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, that professional detailing was anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. And they certainly didn't expect folks to sit around for that, but for the kind of standard detailing, that's my understanding of what they suggested too. So Commissioner Burns.
And one other interesting aspect of this particular request for variation is that the unique plight really isn't based on anything to do with the physical characteristic of the property so much as it is our zoning ordinance. This would be parking class 9 sub G. And this might be an opportunity for us to think a little more about this kind of operation, and should we carve out another letter in the alphabet to accommodate their parking needs.
Good point. Good. H, parking H. So, okay. Seeing no other comments on this, we'll move to the last request, and that is a request for a variation from the sign height requirement. So, can we have anyone have some thoughts on this or questions? Commissioner Snyder?
Yes, thank you. So the variation for the signage is really, they're asking to mount the signage at a 24.5 foot height rather than our 20-foot height. And so the question is, why is that a necessity? What is their plight? What's unique? So, this facility, and looking at the architectural features of the detail center, number one, what stands out is that the design of the building is such that if we limited them to the 20-foot height, these wall signs, the illuminated wall signs, would actually be positioned or mounted over banks of windows, or these false windows. And so I think that would create a lot of unnecessary visual clutter and distraction. Additionally, the applicant noted that because of the building, the existing building on the northernmost section of the property, that the signage on that would not be visible if it were mounted at the 20-foot height. It needs to sit a little higher. So I feel like, this proposed detail center signage package is entirely reasonable. It falls well within the square footage allotment that they've been given. They are really looking to promote their expanded services and be visible to traffic traveling along North Avenue. So I feel like the signage is well suited to the project. It's well suited and complementary to the existing signage. the 4 signs that will be on the detail center that would be granted a variant, that they're requesting a variance for, will be mounted lower than some existing signage on the tower that they have now for the car wash and the logo sign. So I think it falls in line with the character of the neighborhood, the character of the property. It falls in line with the surrounding signage for neighboring businesses. So I think that it does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood at all. The unique circumstances, of course, that they have to work within the boundaries of the existing building in front of it, as well as what the design of the detail center calls for itself. So I think it's a very clean signage package that promotes their expanded services in a very reasonable way. And that's all my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Commissioner Callaway?
I think Commissioner Snyder sufficiently handled it. I don't have anything else.
Right. Thank you. I was just thinking about just the busyness of that particular corner. So a sign that is visible and that additional 4 to 5 feet are really going to make a difference for them. So, okay. Any other just general comments you want to make before we take these request by request? Okay. And I think if we split up the work among commissioners, so no one commissioner has to do all of these, I think that would be wonderful. We're going to take them pretty much in the order we discussed them. So what I would request is a motion and a second for each one of those. And then when we move into, we ask, before we vote, would ask you to take into account what the criteria are for each one of these and make note of them. You don't need, we've done a lot of discussing in that, but so we'll do it in a more succinct manner. So the first one is a request for a map amendment from the R1 single family residence to C2 community shopping and service district for the 3 parcels. So can I have a motion to approve and a second?
So moved.
Commissioner Burns, and a second.
Second.
Commissioner Garland, thank you very much. Commissioner Burns, would you like to address yourself to the comments? To the criteria.
Yes, the criteria for a map amendment.
Correct.
Considering existing uses of property within the general area of the property in question. At the zoning classification, consider the zoning classification of property within the general area of the property in question, the suitability of the property in question to the uses permitted under the existing zoning classification, as well as the proposed zoning classification, and finally to consider the current comprehensive plan for the city. Having considered those criteria, I find the applicant has met and exceeded each of them.
Thank you. Commissioner Garland, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Well done, Commissioner Burns.
Well done. Any other commissioner have anything they wish to add to that?
I just want to make the comment that I noticed that Commissioner Garland hopped on to the motion that was proposed by Commissioner Burns, which was a very smart move.
So noted. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to ask Eileen Franz to call the roll on this.
Thank you. And this is for the requested map amendment.
Correct.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next motion is really to approve the plat of subdivision, to combine the 4 lots into 1 lot. At this point, there are no criteria to consider. It's simply you've seen the plat, what they are requesting, and so the motion would be to approve that. So can I get a motion to approve and a second? Commissioner Callaway and then Commissioner McCoy seconds. Do you want to make any comments, Commissioner Callaway?
No, I just would say that I think for the purposes of, and I think frankly, Commissioner Burns really pretty comprehensively covered this, but the idea of consolidating these lots for the purpose of, that the car wash and the detail center is going to be used, I think it just makes a lot more sense operating under one lot versus 4 separate lots moving forward.
Great. Commissioner McCoy, do you have any comments you want to make?
No, I agree with Commissioner Callaway, everything she said.
You were smart too to pull the second with Commissioner Callaway. Very, very brilliant commissioners we have here. Okay, I will ask Eileen to please call the roll. Let me wait before we do that. Any other commissioner want to make any comment? Okay, seeing none, can you call the roll, Eileen?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. Thank you. That motion is approved. The next motion I would request is someone to make a motion and to second the request for a conditional use permit for a car wash. And you have in front of you the 7 standards. You can highlight some, you can talk about all of them, but please refer to those. Emily, do you want to make a comment before we go on?
I believe Eileen, the city planner, has a potential condition for the commission to consider.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring the conditions to the commission's attention. We read 2 conditions into the record at the public hearing last week. I did send those draft conditions to you before the meeting and we posted them on board docs. We actually added a 3rd condition regarding a potential sidewalk on Glade because that would be the area where the applicant would need to work with the city. So conditions are tied to conditional use permits. So if you do choose to adopt those draft conditions, I would just request they're included with the conditional use permit motions.
Will you read those for us?
First one is the applicant shall use its best efforts to obtain approval from IDOT to construct a sidewalk along the south side of North Avenue as North Avenue abuts the applicant's property. Are you muted, Chair Rose? I'm getting. Thank you. I'll start over. The applicant shall use its best efforts to obtain approval from IDOT to construct a sidewalk along the south side of North Avenue as North Avenue abuts the applicant's property and a crosswalk that meets all accessibility requirements on the east side of Glade Avenue at North Avenue. The applicant shall make application to IDOT and shall make a commercially reasonable effort to obtain the necessary IDOT permits to construct said sidewalk and crosswalk. However, the applicant does not need to secure the IDOT permits prior to the construction of the applicant's project, and if IDOT does not issue the necessary permits, this condition shall not prevent the city from issuing a final certificate of occupancy for the applicant's project. Number 2, the applicant shall work with the city of Elmhurst to construct a sidewalk along Glade from the north to south property line of the applicant's property. However, the applicant does not need to secure permit for the sidewalk prior to the construction of the applicant's project. And if the city does not issue the necessary permits, this condition shall not prevent the city from issuing a final certificate of occupancy for the applicant's project. And number 3, coordinate with Burger King on shared exit to North Avenue from Bonnie Bray Avenue. Signage should be provided indicating that the driveway is exit only.
Great, thank you very much. So my understanding is that these conditions are attached now to the request for a conditional use for a car wash. So you would be approving those in addition to the conditional use. So can I have a motion to approve in a second? Commissioner Pittman moves and seconded by Commissioner Hoffman. Thank you. Commissioner Pittman.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rose. I think this one is pretty clear. The 7 standards that are outlined here, I think, it's an existing car wash. So they're currently being met. I don't believe that anything changes based on what they've presented. And I also agree that we should adopt those conditions that were laid out by the city. I think those are all positive things that would impact the project in a good way for the residents and for safety measures.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Hoffman, do you have any comments you want to make?
Totally agree with Commissioner Pittman. Would just add that, yes, the standards are met and in some instances improved upon by what's being suggested.
Okay. Any other commissioner wish to make comment on this request? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Eileen to call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. That request is approved. Let us move on to conditional use. Eileen, I'm going to ask you to mute yours. Okay, thank you. This is a conditional use permit for the automobile detail shop. There are no extra conditions set onto this at this point. So can I have a motion to approve and a second? Commissioner McCoy, and second, who would like to second that? Commissioner Uditsky. Okay, Commissioner McCoy.
I believe that the conditional use permit for the automobile detail shop, all of the standards for review have been followed, And I guess I have one question. Is the 3 extra draft conditions, those only apply to the car wash and not the detail thing? It was all one building.
Let me ask Eileen.
They can be imposed on both.
Then if that's the case, I would also include the 3 draft conditions which we've been given to when agreeing with this conditional use permit.
Thank you. I stand corrected on that. So, and the second was Commissioner Uditsky. Do you have any comments you want to make on this particular?
No additional comments. I agree with Commissioner McCoy. I think the use is wholly appropriate to go with the car wash. No need to belabor the point.
Gotcha. Anyone else on the commission wish to make a comment? Seeing none, I will ask Eileen to call the roll.
Thank you. So this is the conditional use permit for the detail shop with conditions. Commissioner McCoy. I think you're muted. I think you're muted, Commissioner McCoy.
I think she's asking for somebody to unmute her.
Unmute.
Oh, here we go.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. Okay, that passes. The next one is the variation from the reservoir spaces required for a car wash. They currently have 6. The code requires 46, I believe, and they are asking for a variation for 26. So we have the standards of review. Can I have a motion to approve and a second?
So moved.
Commissioner Snyder moves, and a second. Commissioner Callaway. There she is.
Okay, am I up? Great. So the 3 standards of variation for the reservoir spaces: the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. The variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And the third is the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return or provide the owner or tenants a reasonable enjoyment of the property if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in its zone. So I think these conditions are all met. This is a very confined space. Currently, there's only 6 reservoir spaces available. They're proposing 26. They're going to improve the condition, improve the queuing. So this is great. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Callaway, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
I would only pick up on the fact that the additional space that's provided in the queuing and taking that traffic off of North Avenue certainly makes this a more acceptable condition.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Anyone else? Any other commissioner wish to make a comment at this point? Okay, seeing none, I will ask Eileen to call the roll for the vote.
Thank you. Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes, that motion passes. Next one we have is a variation from the parking requirements for the detail shop. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this variation?
So moved.
Commissioner Burns, and a second.
I would say second, but I wouldn't like any grief from Commissioner Callaway.
I can't
Second.
guarantee that, Commissioner Garland, so I'll take your second. Commissioner Burns.
Yes, we believe we adequately discussed this standards review. Briefly recapped the plight of the owner due to unique circumstances. The unique circumstance is really the zoning ordinance requirement. The variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It will not. And cannot yield a reasonable return, provide the owner's tenants a reasonable enjoyment of the property, if not granted. And I believe that's the case. So I believe they meet the standards of review for this variation.
Thank you. Commissioner Garland, any comments?
I would agree with Commissioner Burns and just would add that notwithstanding the onerous requirements by the zoning, or what's required by zoning, I think that their use and how they're looking to use that and the number of cars that will be at any given time in there is quite reasonable. And so I believe all the standards have been met for variation.
Excellent, thank you. Any other comments from any commissioner on this request for variation? Seeing none, I'll ask Eileen to call the roll.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland. Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky,
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. That motion passes. And the last variation we have is a request. Can I have a motion to approve the variation from the sign height requirement? A motion and a second.
So moved.
Commissioner Snyder and Commissioner Hoffman seconds. Commissioner Snyder.
So the three standards for variation, just again, briefly recap, apply to the owners due to unique circumstances. The variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return, permitted to be used only under conditions allowed. So again, this is just a unique circumstance in terms of their expanded business services. They need to place the signage at an appropriate visible height. They have a building, an existing building that they have to deal with and be able to elevate the signage above the height of that building, as well as negotiate the architectural features of the proposed detail facility. So the placement of that signage really makes a lot of sense in terms of the circumstances. It's completely in line with the character of the C2 zoning, of the surrounding businesses and their existing signage within their own property. And the 24.5-foot variance will allow them the greatest return on their investment in terms of gaining new business and promoting their new offerings. So I will support it.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman.
I guess just real quick, echoing Commissioner Snyder's comments and yours earlier, Chair Rose, it's really the design of the new building that is forcing the signage above the 20-foot requirement, the use of that spandrel glass, which really makes, I think, a big difference in terms of how the building looks to the surrounding community is important. And as such, I think is worth going over the standard.
Great, thank you very much. Any other commissioner wish to make a comment on this motion? All right, seeing none, Eileen, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. That passes as well. I want to thank all of you. This is a large project here in Elmhurst. We had a lot of public input into it. And there were, what makes it complicated are that there were 7 different requests, but you all just did a fabulous job. Thank you so much for that. So this will now move on to Development Planning and Zoning Committee, is that correct?
That is correct, but I don't believe it's going to move forward to their next meeting on Monday. We're under kind of a time limit because of some committee of the whole meetings, and there's already some items on the agenda. So I will let the applicant know when that date will be, and I will also reach out to the neighbors who have been following the case as well.
Right. Thank you very much. I was really impressed with the quality of comments from the neighbors and their obvious concern about their own neighborhood and their love of their neighborhood. And I was really pleased to see them participate. And I was actually also pleased that the petitioner really did pay attention to many of those comments. So, okay, let's move on to our next case for deliberation. Case 20P12, 365 Shady Lane, the Zewood subdivision and variations. So I'll do what I didn't do before. Don't we have to have a motion to deliberate? Yes. Which we did. We did the motion. We did that motion to approve. So, so can we just have a motion and a second to deliberate?
So moved.
Commissioner Uditsky, and a second from Commissioner McCoy. Thank you. I guess, do we want to call the roll on that then?
I don't think we need to. This is just to open up
Just to open up discussion. All right. This one, I think we have two requests, but I am going to suggest that we first, pardon? There's three, I'm sorry. The variation from lot, there's three of them. Plat a subdivision to create 2 new lots from 1 lot. Variation from the lot frontage requirement of 60 feet to 50 feet. And then a variation from the lot requirement of 9,000 square feet to 84,000 square feet were they to be subdivided. And the same is about the second variation. So I would like to follow a similar process here where we primarily consider the second 2 variations, and then we would consider the plat of subdivision to create 2 new lots. If these passed, if they do not pass, do we have to consider the plat of subdivision, Eileen?
Yes, I do think you need to vote on all the.
You still would need to vote on it.
Yes, because it still will move forward to the city council.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest we do the same process here where we really look at this as a whole and discuss this. Really, the first would be the variation. So they're requesting a plat of subdivision. There's a current lot that is 100 feet as a frontage, the frontage requirement, and they're requesting that in this zoning area, it is 60 feet, and they're requesting that if they split it, these are 2 50-foot lots. And these 2 lots would be at 8,400 approximately square feet, which is a reduction in the lot requirement of 9,000. So I want you to pay particular attention to the standards for variation, but let me throw this open for discussion. Anyone has some points they want to make, and then we'll take them, we'll vote on them. So, Commissioner Uditsky.
So unfortunately, I don't have the paperwork in front of me to go through the standards individually. However, just a couple of comments. We heard a lot from the residents about, about flooding, which we hear quite a bit about, or maybe have heard in the past more about, and less so, since the city, did its flood control project. But this area obviously, gets hit more. I think actually subdividing the property may, in the end, have a positive effect because of the new requirements that the city has in terms of underground vaults, and that type of thing. That being said, I don't really feel that the flooding issue is really, relevant. I don't see any real compelling reason with respect to the standards or otherwise why we would permit the subdivision of this lot. It's not really in keeping with the neighborhood, which if you've driven in and around that area in particular, there aren't sidewalks, it's wooded, there are bigger lots, right? I think people move to that area for that particular reason. I mean, the petitioner, frankly, the only thing that the petitioner really conveyed in terms of subdividing the lot was that, the petitioner and the gentleman that was doing most of the talking was saying, well, wants to be there for his, for his family, and then maybe sell off one of the lot. I really didn't see a reason that was articulated. It's not necessarily like every lot there is being converted to, say, a 50-foot lot. There are lots of lots, and in fact, probably the majority of them are greater, than that 50-foot wide, or I guess it would be under 9,000 square feet, whatever the, the subdivided lot is. So I just don't see that the petitioner articulated any reasonable reason for us to approve the subdivision. And while I'm sympathetic, to all of the neighbors and the people there with respect to the flooding, personally, I don't even think we really need to go there as a reason to not, subdivide it, because you can get into arguments about, well, subdividing it may in fact be better for the flooding because you may end up with more mitigation, right, as required by the city. I just don't see that there's any compelling reason other than perhaps the profit of the petitioner, right, to subdivide the lot. You can easily, if somebody wasn't happy with that particular house, they could knock that one down and build the same house they could build on a, on a 50-foot lot. They're just going to have a larger yard. So I just can't see, supporting this request for that reason.
Thank you. Commissioner Snyder, then Commissioner Callaway, and Commissioner Pittman after that.
Thank you. So I'd really like to speak to the character of the area and touch on some of the same points that Commissioner Uditsky pointed out. This is really a unique area of Elmhurst. There's almost nowhere in our city that is quite like it. It's got the semi-rural character that I think really people who live there highly value. They don't want sidewalks. They really want to preserve that semi-rural feel, and subdividing a property in the manner that has been proposed, I do think is counter to that. And what speaks to that is the setbacks. And I think where the flooding issue comes in for me is the requirement or the engineering suggestion that we need a 10-foot setback on a 50-foot wide lot to appropriately deal with the channeling the water along that northern property line. So, a 10-foot, we have 5-foot setbacks on 50-foot wide lots rather than 10-foot setbacks. So I think it would create sort of an odd situation, and they didn't propose a house, or the homes that they proposed for the property weren't appropriate for what ultimately had been recommended in terms of setbacks. So I really feel like it's important to preserve the open space, the character, the setbacks, and so I wouldn't support subdividing the property either.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yeah, with respect to the flooding issue, I do think it's relevant as well. And as I'm reading the transcript and hearing some of the comments from the neighbors, all I can think of is we're creating a situation by dividing these lots, and there's going to be some sort of a moat in between surrounding these houses. That's the visual I had in my head. And I think we heard a lot in the record from the applicant, well, this is okay, this won't bother me, but we don't make alterations to the zoning ordinance to fit the current owner of the property. And as we know, if we agree to subdivide these lots, that is the new standard. And so I think by creating that kind of a situation, we create it into the future. And I think that's really problematic. I also was a little bit frustrated because I don't think that the applicant did great research in terms of the lot sizes of the other properties in the area. There was some confusing testimony about, was this 3 doors down or 5 doors down of these 50-foot lots? And, as I've driven through the neighborhood, and I agree with Commissioner Snyder that neighborhood is very different. And I think, I think to preserve that neighborhood as being a different neighborhood is a really important thing. But if we start subdividing these lots, then I think we are considerably changing this neighborhood, and it's going to look really different. There are lots of new houses in that neighborhood, and clearly those new houses, most of them were built on those 100-foot lots. So I have a really hard time in this case with the criteria of not altering the essential character of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner Callaway. Mr. Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rhodes. I would agree with everyone who's spoken thus far. I don't think that this application fits any of the standards. You've got 38 residential lots on Shady Lane. 5 of those are 50-foot lots. 1 is 55. The rest of them are larger. I think that the lot size is indicative of the neighborhood. I don't think that there is a unique circumstance here. I think somebody purchased a lot in a neighborhood that has larger lots. And I think that it would alter the character of the neighborhood to subdivide it into smaller ones. And I also think that the idea that there isn't a reasonable return provided to the owner, if the goal was for them to seek subdividing, they should have done so before purchasing the property to see whether that was an option. I think that this is a viable property in multiple different ways in terms of keeping it, redeveloping it, renovating it. So I don't think that it is I don't think it's feasible for them to claim that it's not a financial deficit for them to keep it as is. So I'm not in favor of approving this.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Yeah, I do agree with everyone. This is a very interesting part of Elmhurst. And I did a little bit of research to it, just so interesting. This was planted back in 1923, and all the lots were 100-foot frontages at the time. And over the years, there have been a few subdivisions. But what's interesting is it's from 1987 to 2004, there were no new houses built on these three streets: River Glen, Shady Lane, and Ferndale. Most of the houses were built in the 50s and 60s. There was, I think the first one was built in 1945. From 2004 through 2020, there have been 14 new homes built. And none of them were built on any lot less than 60 foot of frontage. Many of them were on 100-foot frontage. The contractor who accompanied the applicant, I believe his name was Eric Wallach, built a house at 336 Ferndale, according to the person who was at 330 Ferndale. In the 336 Ferndale is new construction on a 100-foot lot. So there's plenty of evidence that there are homes built on lots larger than 60 feet, conforming to the zoning requirement. There have been no new homes built on any 50-foot lots in this subdivision. And I would just add that this is a case where the unique circumstance, usually the unique plight for our applicants comes about because they've owned the property for a long time, and now they want to do something different, and they're constrained. Like the people who had the house in York, they just tore it down, the building back again on the same footprint, or the house on Church Street with the 80-foot depth, and so on. In this case, the applicant just bought the lot in March of this year. So they kind of put themselves into this circumstance. And as Commissioner Pittman said, what they really should have done was perhaps put in a contract contingent on rezoning, and then they could have gotten out of it. Now, the purchase price was $360,000. It's not really our bailiwick to decide what's the financial outcome should be, but I think they can accomplish whatever goals they might have without splitting this lot up, changing the character of the neighborhood, and being the first house built on a 50-foot lot since the 1960s.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment? Commissioner McCoy.
The only comment I had was that the 50-foot lots that are there currently, they were grandfathered in when we were past that lots had to be 60 feet. So that's the only reason that there are 50-foot lots there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I'll make a comment. I have to say that I always look really at the first criteria for variation. The plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. I found no evidence presented at all that there was anything unique here. There's nothing odd about the lot. It's not configured differently. It's a 100-foot lot. In a zoning area that has 60-foot lots, I just thought that the petitioner failed to give any evidence to support this idea that it was due to unique circumstances. and that I agree with all the commissioners who've mentioned it, that if this were to be granted, that I find that it would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. My numbers are a little bit different from Commissioner Burns, but I looked up and down and drove there, and that I saw only on the east side of Shady Lane, only 2 homes that were 2 lots that were 50 feet, and on the west side of Shady Lane, only 4 out of 13. There's 13 on each side. So it's not, the petitioner said, oh yeah, there's a lot of 50-foot lots. There are not a lot of 50-foot lots. That is incorrect. So I think it would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Can the property yield a reasonable return? That is not within our bailiwick to determine what someone should charge, but it is within our judgment to determine can they get a reasonable return from this property, and I would think they have. So I absolutely would not approve of any of these 2 variations or of the plat of subdivision. So anyone else want to make a comment? No, then I'm going to ask Eileen, will you please call the roll, and we'll do them A, B, and C the way they are. First, we'll do the plat of subdivision, and then the variance for the frontage, and then the variance for the area.
Okay, so we'll need a motion in a second for the subdivision then.
I guess we do, don't we?
Yeah.
We'll do them one by one. I'm just so excited by the time. Can I have a motion to approve the plat of subdivision to create 2 new lots from 1 lot? Commissioner Callaway moves.
So moved.
And Commissioner Garland seconds.
Second.
Commissioner Callaway, any comments you want to make on this?
I think, not to belabor the point, and I think I sufficiently addressed this. I think others did as well, but I just, given what's been said, and again, we've all driven through the neighborhood, and in my mind, it just makes absolutely no sense to be agreeable to creating 2 lots that are going to be much smaller than what's primarily in the area. So I would not be in support of doing that.
Commissioner Garland, do you have any further comments?
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So.
Okay. Anyone else on the commission want to make an additional comment? Seeing none, I will ask Eileen now to call the roll properly.
Thank you. And this is the motion for the subdivision. Commissioner Callaway.
No.
Commissioner Garland.
No.
Commissioner Burns.
No.
Commissioner Hoffman.
No.
Commissioner McCoy.
No.
Commissioner Pittman.
No.
Commissioner Snyder.
No.
Commissioner Uditsky.
No.
Chair Rose.
No, motion fails. I would then like to ask for a motion to approve the variation request from the lot frontage requirement of 60 feet to 50 feet. A motion and a second on that.
So moved.
Commissioner Burns, and a second.
Second.
Commissioner Uditsky. Commissioner Burns.
In my opinion, the plight of the owner is not due to unique circumstances. The variation if granted will alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And I believe the property in question can yield a reasonable return or reasonable enjoyment to the owner without the variation being granted.
Thank you. Commissioner Uditsky, any further comment?
No further comment. I agree with the esteemed Commissioner Burns wholeheartedly.
Great. Any other commissioner like to make a comment at this point? Okay, seeing none, Eileen, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Yes. I'm sorry, no.
Commissioner Uditsky.
No.
Commissioner Callaway.
No.
Commissioner Garland.
No.
Commissioner Hoffman.
No.
Commissioner McCoy,
No.
Commissioner Pittman,
No.
Commissioner Snyder,
No.
Chair Rose.
No. Thank you. That motion fails. And the last motion, I would ask for a motion to approve the variation from the lot area requirement of 9,000 square feet to 8,440.5 square feet. A motion and a second. Commissioner Hoffman moves, and a second. Commissioner McCoy seconds. Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. As mentioned previously, there are not unique circumstances with this particular standard. The variation, if granted, will actually significantly alter the essential character of the neighborhood. As many of the commissioners have mentioned previously, the property in question can yield a reasonable return or provide the owner or tenants reasonable enjoyment without the variation.
Thank you. Commissioner McCoy.
I agree with everything Commissioner Hoffman has stated.
Thank you very much. Any other commissioner wish to make a comment on this case, on this motion rather? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Eileen to please call the roll.
Thank you. This is for the variation for lot area. Commissioner Hoffman,
No.
Commissioner McCoy,
No.
Commissioner Burns,
No.
Commissioner Callaway,
No.
Commissioner Garland,
No.
Commissioner Pittman,
No.
Commissioner Snyder,
No.
Commissioner Uditsky,
No.
Chair Rose.
No. That motion fails. So this will, you'll notify the petitioner. Does this then go to DPZ? Okay, so thank you all very much for your thoughtfulness given to that case as well. Next item of business we have is other business. Eileen, is there some other business you want to bring before us?
Just a couple comments. We will be using Zoom moving forward for our meetings. It looks like we had a publication issue with one of the cases for December 1st. So our December 1st meeting might be a light agenda. It looks like we'll be having Timothy Christian come back with their final PUD, and we may have another case that evening. I'm still trying to figure that out. So I will send an updated schedule soon, but we are expecting that we will probably meet December 1st and December 15th. December 1st will probably be a lighter meeting. And then December 15th, we will most likely have a fuller agenda. And we don't have anything officially scheduled for our January meetings yet, but we do have some cases that we know are coming forward. So I'm expecting us to be busy over the next couple months, but we will continue in this format for the time being due to the COVID pandemic.
Thank you very much. So I don't know about anybody else, but I really like this Zoom format better than WebEx. So it's a little easier to navigate. So
Yeah, if I could just comment to that, Susan. I do 2 Zoom calls a week with the City of Chicago Department of Planning and Development, and they do roundtables. We've had as many as 85 people and no problems.
Yeah.
So this is great.
yeah, I really like, it's a really good format if we're going to do this. So, and we are going to continue with virtual meetings easily into January. We don't know how much longer, but certainly we'll continue that. And I want to, again, applaud Mike Stennett from the city for his effort in this, and Eileen and Emily and Mike Kopp, all who really add to this and make this go as smooth as it can. So thank you very, very much. So, okay, seeing no other business, can I have a motion to adjourn? So moved, Commissioner Callaway. Second. Oh, Commissioner Callaway, you had it.
Yeah, I'm happy to make the motion, but I just wanted to also thank you guys for our cheat sheet tonight. That was really helpful. I mean, this was complicated. So thanks for the extra work done on this because it really made things easier for us.
It's a big thank you to Emily Egan who prepared that. So thank you, Emily. It's a great job. And you want to make a motion to adjourn as well, Commissioner Callaway? Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Pittman seconds that. All right. Well, we have to call the roll to adjourn. So.
Commissioner Callaway,
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Garland,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Uditsky,
Yes, sorry.
Chair Rose.
Yes, we will stand adjourned, not before I wish all of you really a wonderful Thanksgiving. This may be a Thanksgiving unlike many others we've had, but I hope you all have a really happy Thanksgiving with your families or whoever is close to you, and stay safe. And we'll see you after that holiday.
Thanks, Susan. You know, all those depictions of the first Thanksgiving, they're outdoors.
That's very unrealistic given the weather in Massachusetts.